Hello everyone and welcome back to Mrs. B History. Today we're diving into one of the most deceptively simple questions on the Anglo-Saxon and Norman England paper. Now this is the first question and it's a 4-mark question. Tiny on paper but mighty in the number of marks that students lose every single year, and I don't want that to happen to you. So in this video, I'm going to slow it right down and show you exactly how to approach it with confidence. We'll look at what the question is really asking, walk through the mark scheme, explore the exact structure the examiners love, and break down model answers, including a genuine student response that scored full marks. Stick with me to the end because once you master this question, you're protecting 4 marks that you can bank every single time. So let's get started. First things first, what is question 1a? The question always asks you to describe 2 features of something in the Anglo-Saxon and Norman England course. Today we're going to be looking at the question, describe 2 features of the role of tenants-in-chief in Norman England. It is worth exactly 4 marks and it tests assessment objective 1. This means pure knowledge and understanding, and ideally you should spend no longer than 5 minutes on it, because the big mark questions that follow need your time and energy. One crucial thing to remember is this. This question can be asked about anything on the specification, not just tenants-in-chief. It could be the earls, the witan, the sheriffs, or even the role of the church. But the technique, the way you answer, stays precisely the same. That's what makes this question such an easy win when you know what you're doing. Now, before you even lift your pen, you must first decode the question, that is, where top grade students separate themselves from the pack. Describe. This is your signal that the examiners don't want analysis, causes, consequence, or significance. They want facts. Clear, accurate, well-chosen factual statements. That's it. 2 features. This means exactly 2, not 1 detailed paragraph, nor 4 scattered ideas. 2 features, each treated properly in its own mini paragraph. The role of tenants-in-chief. This phrase is absolutely vital. It tells you who to write about and exactly what aspect of them. Not thanes, not sheriffs, not knights, tenants-in-chief, and specifically their role in Norman England. And Norman England tells you the time period. Anything from pre-conquest Anglo-Saxon society is irrelevant here. Anchor everything firmly after 1066. Decoding keeps you focused, and focus keeps you getting the marks. So let's pick up from the mark scheme, because honestly, once you understand it, question 1a becomes one of the most predictable marks on the whole exam. You earn 1 mark for identifying a valid feature and 1 mark for giving precise supporting detail linked to that feature. You repeat that process twice for 2 different features. That gives you your 4 marks. The mark scheme itself gives examples like tenants-in-chief had a military role, that's your 1st mark, and they led groups of knights for the king, that would be your 2nd mark. Or they had a financial role, which is your 1st mark, and they paid the king a share of the income from their land, which is your 2nd mark. Or they equipped knights by providing weapons and horses, again, a feature plus detail. The golden rule is this. Your detail must be directly linked to the feature. If the examiner can't see the link, then you lose that 2nd mark. So choose your details wisely and make the connection clear. So here is your foolproof, examiner approved structure, the one I want you to memorize. Sentence 1, the feature. State the feature clearly. Use the correct vocabulary. Don't waffle. This earns your 1st mark immediately. Sentence 2, the supporting detail. Give a specific fact that expands your feature. Again, connecting directly back to what you said. This is your 2nd mark. And then you repeat it for feature 2, but with completely different content. 2 features, 2 sentences each, 4 marks, job done. Now here are some sentence starters that I recommend, not because you must use them, but because they steer you towards the structure that examiners reward. For your feature sentences, one feature of the role of tenants-in-chief was, or tenants-in-chief were responsible for, a key feature of their role was, tenants-in-chief had a military or financial or legal role which involved, and then you have a different sentence structure for your detailed sentences. For example, they were required to. This meant that in practice, this is shown by the fact that, in practice, this involved. One tip from me is vary your openers between feature 1 and feature 2 because it signals to the examiner that you are giving two distinct features. So before we write any model answers, let's quickly recap the role of tenants-in-chief because without content, even perfect structure can't save you. In the normal feudal system, tenants-in-chief sat just below the king. They controlled vast areas of land and were some of the most powerful individuals in England after William. Their responsibilities fell into four major categories. The first was military, providing the king with a quota of armed knights for up to 40 days a year, leading, equipping, and supplying them. Then you have financial, paying the king a proportion of their income from their fief, and offering feudal dues like relief when inheriting land. Legal and advisory, they attended the Curia Regis, advising the king and holding their own courts to settle disputes. And lastly was local control. They governed large regions on the king's behalf and ensured law, order, and loyalty throughout their territory. Any of these can form the basis of a brilliant 4-mark response. Every year, the examiner highlights the same pitfalls, and if you avoid them, you're already outperforming half the cohort. So, one of the key things is writing about the wrong thing or the wrong group. For this, you need to make sure that you are writing about the tenants-in-chief and not confusing them with thanes or sheriffs. These roles are not interchangeable, so writing about the wrong group scores 0. Mistake 2 that you could make with this question is identifying a role but giving no detail. Saying they advise the king is fine, but without naming something like the Curia Regis, you're only really going to earn 1 mark. Mistake 3 could be writing only one sentence per feature. Examiners struggle to see the link between feature and detail if it's all crammed into one sweeping sentence. And mistake 4 is repeating the same idea in feature 2. If both features are just military service in disguise, you're capped at 2 marks. Avoid these mistakes and you're on safe ground. So let's look at an example of feature 1, and I'm going to look at the military role. So my feature sentence will say, one feature of the role of tenants-in-chief was a military obligation to the king. Now I'm going to add my detailed sentence. For example, they were required to provide the king with a quota of knights for up to 40 days of military service each year, equipping and leading those knights from the lands they held as their fief. Why this works is that it's precise, specific, and tightly linked. The 40 days, the quota, and the fief, these are all the kind of details the examiners will like. So now I need to provide feature 2, and I'm going to make sure it's completely different from the military role. So in this instance, I'm now looking at finance. So my feature sentence would say something like, tenants-in-chief also had a financial role in supporting the king. And then my sentence with detail in would say, this is shown by the fact that they were obliged to give the king a proportion of the income from their fief, the lands granted to them in exchange for their loyalty and service, as well as paying feudal dues such as relief when inheriting lands. Again, this is crystal clear, linked, focused, and entirely different from feature 1. Together, these two should earn you the full 4 marks. Now feature 2, a completely different area, so now we're going to look at the financial role. So my feature sentence would say something like, tenants-in-chief also had a financial role in supporting the king. Then my detailed sentence would be, this is shown by the fact that they were obliged to give the king a proportion of the income from their fief, the land granted to them in exchange for their loyalty and service, as well as paying feudal dues such as relief when inheriting land. Again, it's crystal clear, it's linked and it's focused, and entirely different from feature 1. Together, these two will earn you the full 4 marks. So here's some other features that you can write about. You could talk about their legal and advisory role and about them attending the Curia Regis to advise the king and help govern the kingdom. They also had courts on their own land to settle disputes. You could talk about the loyalty and the homage, swearing an oath of fealty to the king in exchange for their fief. This personal bond was the foundation of the feudal relationship. You could talk about their role supporting knights. They equipped and supplied knights from their fiefs, providing horses, weapons, and armour for military service on behalf of the king. Or you can talk about them controlling their subtenants, granting parts of their lands to knights and lesser lords in return for their own service and loyalty, passing the feudal structure down. Any of these, if written about with their point and evidence, will get you full marks. Now, before moving on in the exam, run through this mental checklist. Have I described two separate and distinct features? Are both features specifically about tenants in chief? Have I written two sentences per feature? Is my detail linked directly to the feature above it? Are my two features genuinely different? Have I used precise vocabulary like fief, knight service, feudal dues, homage, and curia regis? If all of these are ticked, you've secured your 4 marks. And that's question 1A done. Now you can move on to the higher mark questions with confidence. If this video has helped, make sure to like, subscribe and click for notifications. I'll be uploading more videos breaking down every question type in Anglo-Saxon and Norman England. Plus, I've already started to do some guides for crime and punishment and the Whitechapel and historic environment, Nazi Germany and the Cold War. There's also lots of videos on revision content for your Edexcel History GCSE course. So keep revising smart and I'll see you in the next video.